I would like to welcome you all to the Loau University for this particular program known as Loau and World Scholars. Firstly, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land here in Australia, particularly in Canberra, the Ngunnawal and the Ngāpuhi tribes. And I would like to also acknowledge all lineages here in Canberra, the Crown Prince, the Bodoa Ukalala, and Princess Latofuteka, and all lineages overseas, as well as in Tonga, and also in the land of Vaihi, where my guest speaker for today is residing, Professor Dr. Tevita, ceremonially known as Maui-Ta-Va-He-Ako. I welcome all of you from different walks of life, and this is our first English program since we paused in December since December last year, and now we are back to a normal scheme of things. And without further ado, I would like to He-Ako to start with our specific topic for today, which is a translation of our talk in the Tongan language last program 2 weeks ago, and the specific topic is entitled Tongan or Modern Indigenous Knowledge of Natural Phenomena. Okay, I'll pass on to Professor Maui-Ta-Va-He-Ako. Thank you, Maui-Ta-Va-He-Ako.
MALO Pito, Professor Dr. Siosiua Lafitani, Vavangakitupu'a, for the opportunity to return and to have this hold this discussion. To talk specifically about this area of our research to focus on this topic of Tongan indigenous knowledge, and how this indigenous knowledge is related to the explanation of natural phenomena. And we will focus specifically on volcanic eruption, and also Be'aukula or tsunami. So I'd like to spend some time discussing these topic. Professor Lafitani, sound is okay?
It's not really okay at the moment. Ka'ili, I'll quickly have a look at it.
Is it working now?
Have you unplugged? Yeah, just try. Are you unplugging your headset there?
I unplugged my headphone to see if that will.
I'll quickly have a look.
I'm still receiving echo.
Yeah, I'll just quickly have a look from here. Please just bear with me. So you unplug it. Okay, I'm into the system to double check this thing. It's okay. This is okay.
How about now? Still echoing.
It's not repeated. I think it's better. Uh, what do you have?
Is it better?
Yeah, can you continue, please? Yeah.
Okay, I will continue. So in our last Tongan Talanoa, I specifically wanted to raise some question and
Kylie,
give some example.
excuse me, Kylie, Professor Kylie. Yeah, it's better. It's better. Continue. Yeah, it's just the echo, but no repetition. Thank you, Marlo. Continue on. Yeah, a small echo. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah. So part of what I was going to discuss is to talk specifically about the way many of our indigenous knowledge our legends, mythologies, or stories. And what I wanted to specifically talk about is that the ones that are related to volcanic eruption and also to tsunami or Belkula. In some scientists look at these particular kinds of stories as geomythology in the sense that these are explanation that cultures came up to explain natural phenomena. And one of the things that we see in our Tongan cosmogony or origin story, we see some of these explanations uh, that are associated specifically with ancestors or deified ancestors such as Tangaloa and also the Tangaloa clan, but also the Maui clan. Yeah. And I want to talk specifically about one of the stories that appears to be a story related to volcanic eruption. But of course, many of these stories are told in Heiaki form, which is metaphoric, um, poetic metaphors, as the way that our ancestors told these stories. So the one that I want to share is the one that associated with the creation of Ata. In this particular story, there appears to be some uh, versions of this story that is explaining natural phenomena, but also in the Heiaki poetic form. So in this particular story, this is one of the creation story. We have several creation story, and there's appears to also be other creation stories that happened before this. But the one that's specifically with the Tangaloa. In this stories, there's Tangaloa Eiki, Tangaloa the chief, and then there is Tangaloa Atulongolongo, sort of kind of Tangaloa the messenger, and then there is Tangaloa Tufunga, and these three are involved in this particular creation of this island called Ata. According to the story, Tangaloa Eiki commanded Tangaloa Atulongolongo to go and look for land. And in the story, Tangaloa Atulongolongo came in a form of a kiu, a Pacific, golden Pacific plover. And in this form, or maybe it's avatar, came and looked and couldn't find any land, and went back and said to Tangaloa Eiki, I only see a sort of reef that is showing, but there's not really much of a land. So Tangaloa Eiki asked Tangaloa Tufunga to throw down some ashes or efu, or shaving from his tufunga place, his art workshop, to form this particular land called Ata. And so, according to the story, Tangaloa Tufunga uh, threw down from Langi, from the sky, these ashes, um, or you can probably think of it as dust. But the Tongan translation for these are actually related to pumice and some of the rocks that are associated with volcanic eruption.
Yeah.
And then, as Tangaloto Funga threw these down, it formed the island of Ata. Out of that island came the first plant, which is a fue plant. It's a sort of a creeper plant. And from there emerged the first three Tongan males. What I want to emphasize is that this story or this geomythology is referencing a sort of a volcanic eruption. The idea that ashes are throwing down from the sky is very similar to what happened in Tonga in January during the eruption of Hunga Tonga and Hunga Hapai. We see that people noticed that as the volcanic eruption, that ashes from the sky fell down into people's home and so forth. So what I think is happening here is probably there was a volcanic eruption nearby, and some of those ashes fell down in Ata and probably also Ewa, and some of those ashes helped with the creation of these islands.
Yeah.
And so what we find in this story is an indigenous knowledge about, or so it's both history and also scientific, because on the historical side it's recording a historical event that happened. And of course that historical event is the eruption of a probably a nearby volcanic mountain close to Wata and Ewa. And then it also is explaining the scientific process of how these ashes fell from the sky down to form the islands. There, it's very scientific in the sense that it talks about how the first plant that emerged out of there was the fue plants, which we have seen in many of the formations of new islands in Tonga. After ashes would fall in a new island, we saw this back in when Hunga Tonga and Hunga Hapai first erupted, and it created an island in the middle. After a while, the first plant that actually emerged was the fue plant, and then as soon as the fue plant emerged, then you would see birds coming to visit the island. And
That's
some of
right.
these birds included plover, the kiu, and many other kinds of birds. So for me, the scientific process or the natural phenomena process that happened is recorded in this particular story. So this is the Tangaloa, and we're talking here thousands of years ago that's been preserved in these stories, and that's just from the Tangaloa point of view of how natural phenomena is recorded. And for me, I think this is an explanation of a volcanic eruption that helped with the creation of islands such as Ata and also Ewa. Of course, from then, the first three humans, males, grew up from there. So you can also see that this is a heiaki to the after the land was formed, plants grow, birds came, and then humans, of course, came after that. So the sequence of the process is all recorded in this geomythology, right? Geomythology, as many have been researching and looking in this area. And so, what I wanted to say about that is that today, when sometimes in Tonga there is the surprise when a volcanic eruption happens, and I don't think there should be any surprises to people because this phenomenon has been happening and it's been recorded. in our tradition. Whether we call it mythology or legends or traditional narratives, they are recorded and have been passed down. The work that we need to do is to sort of open up and unpack the, the poetic, metaphorical language in order to see both the historical and the scientific elements that are wrapped inside this story. So I want to kind of maybe start with that, Professor Lafitani, with the story of at least begin with that particular story of the Tangaloa and the creation of Ata and Ewa, and put forth the idea that what that story is most likely recording is a volcanic eruption that happened in Tonga thousands of years ago. So maybe we'll begin with that and see if you have any other additions to that story, and then we'll come back and then I'll talk a little bit about the other groups such as the Maui and so forth.
Malo Abito, Professor Kaili, and I think it sounds really good to kick off the dialogue with that myth. As you have mentioned, there are a few others as well. And I was, before proceeding on, I was thinking with the translation of the title, and it's very fascinating for me. Indigenous knowledge, or Tongan or Moana knowledge of natural phenomena. And the statement with the translation itself, it reflects, it already reflects the, as you have said, the scientific nature of our knowledge. Yeah? It's a knowledge of natural phenomena, and with that first myth or tala or story, I think it makes sense. It's about, I'm also interested not only of its scientific aspect, but the wisdom within them to put it in a hierarchy, in a poetical or imagery explanation for whatever purposes, as you know, in our last program in the Tongan language, you mentioned your Tava view on that on Heliaki. But it's very, it impresses me, and it's very interesting why they didn't pass from mouth to mouth directly as they actually observed and they experience in nature, but with their own purpose, they put it in unique purpose. They put it in a heliaki, in a mythical way, and I think it's more, as I said, the form of myth. It's very interesting for me how they just explain one sentence to cover the whole story. It's, you know, without telling the details. They explain some details, but that's not all. Just to support the main theme or the form of the myth. But I do believe, as you have clearly explained, that was a scientific observation. It was an observation through experience, and was put or were put into knowledge form, body of knowledge, and then wrap it up with Eliaki. Yeah? But when you know, to be short, and I'd like to pass it on, to pass it back to you. As you explained, when you try to unwrap or peel off the heliaki, then what is inside is it's all about Peaukula or Mofuike or Moafi or volcanic eruption that were happened at the time in whatever year, whatever periods that this event will happen, or these or some events will happen continuously for a period of time. Eh? But all you have explained, Kaeli, I fully support because it somehow gives us the same details. When we unwrap the form, when we unwrap the heliaki, the imagery, and the poetical, we started to see the contents, the details, the actuality of the events in distant past. Eh? But I'll pass on to you to continue. Thank you. Eh?
Yeah. Thank you, um, Professor Lafitani, for that addition. And I want to just make a comment about why I think they wrapped it up in heriaki or in imagery or metaphoric language. Yeah, from a Tava viewpoint, this was an artistic approach um, to create beauty through the explanation of these very natural phenomena. You know, the phenomena was based on their experience, empirical observation, where they observed it using their senses to observe, and then they turn it into a work of art through the use of poetry and metaphors and symbols and so forth. So that's the way I see it, that they were also creating a particular form of beauty in the way that they were encoding the information and passing it down. Um, so on the one hand, it was important to create that artistic approach, but it also helped with the preservation of the knowledge. The knowledge was able to preserve and you could pass it on in that form. I think it was easier to remember it in that form when you put it in the form of a heriaki or story. So that's just my me sort of kind of theorizing on some possibility, and maybe we can debate this a little bit more and unpack to
Yeah.
see whether this is the right way to think about it. But that's the sort of kind of the
Because
way
the
I'm thinking about this, the way our ancestors, because the West, in the way that it creates scientific knowledge, is very technical and straightforward. Most of their knowledge, especially scientific knowledge, are not wrapped in poetic metaphors, and so in that sense, this is where we sort of kind of different, and it sort of something that me and you we spoke about this before, the oneness of our scientific and humanities or artistic and science seem to kind of go together and supporting each other in the way that we communicate our indigenous knowledge. And so we see this here with the Mo'ungafi, the volcanic eruption of Hunga and Hunga. I think one question that we may want to ask is why the Tangaloa? Why would the Tangaloa involved in this? And I've heard different explanation for the Tangaloa. One possibility is that the Tangaloa were the knowledgeable people. They were the scientists who knew a lot about these natural phenomena, and therefore they are associated not only with that knowledge system, but also the body of knowledge was sort of associated with them. And so even later, when people would hear a Mo'ungafi exploding or an eruption of a volcanic, they would still call that the Tangaloa are still involved in it because they were the sort of kind of the original
yeah.
scientists who started that knowledge system, and that's the way I'm seeing it. I know that others have talked about the Tangaloa as possibly some of the earlier chiefs, paramount chiefs in the Pacific. So there might be a political dimension to them. But that's the way I see the Tangaloa, as these are the earlier scientists, prominent scientists of our time, and so we continue to associate the knowledge with them. Very very similar to the way that we continue to associate different scientific knowledge with Einstein, and even his theory of his general theory of relativity. We still think about it within the context of Einstein and associate that with him. And I think it might be the similar reasons for why Tangaloa are associated with these particular natural phenomena. And of course, this we're only talking about the volcanic eruption. There are other areas where the Tangaloas are also involved in. Like for example, just the name Tangaloa Tufunga, the idea that this is
Yeah.
Tangaloa, the carpenter, the
The co-
architect.
the builder. Yeah.
It's a very poetic, but also at the same time, we can see that it's saying, these are the Tangaloa who help with the creations of islands and so forth. The natural creation of these islands, and it's a process of tufunga, an artistic process. So those are some of my thoughts as far as the Tangaloa and so forth. Now, I want to continue to talk about the Maui clan, because that's another clan that we can see that there's a lot of natural phenomena that are associated with the Maui clan. And the ones that are really associated with the Maui clan is one, they're associated with fire and the making of fire, which we see in many of our geomythology. They are associated with earthquake, particularly
Yeah.
Maui Motua. He seemed to be the one that is associated with um, this area of earthquake or Mofuike. And then we also see that they are associated with um, Beaukura,
Yeah.
tsunami, or especially the boulders that we see all over in Tonga, some in the east, some in the west,
Yeah.
uh, and especially the ones that we see in Kala'au, close to Fahefa, and also the one we see in Havenuliku. And then, of course, there are other ones that I noticed that you have identified in some of your writing, in your posts, Professor Lafitani, of some of these stones. So the story, the geomythology that are associated with the Maui is that as far as earthquake or mofuike, one of the story is that Maui Motua is the carrier of the earth. That the earth is carried by Maui Motua, and then when Maui Motua falls asleep, then oftentimes that will roll the earth, and so that would create the mafuike. And one of the tradition is that people would pound on the ground or on the soil to wake up Maui Motua. Uh, so that's the part about Maui Motua. The part about fire and this association of Maui's with the fire making and also with bringing fire. Fire is associated with um, volcanic eruption, and then fires are under in the underworld, especially as we see the movement of the lava, and fire would come from the
That's right.
from under the earth, right? So it makes sense to me to see that some of our geomythology it relates to the idea of how fire was under under the earth, and then it was brought from under the earth to the surface,
Service.
and it was the Maui who brought this from from the under the earth. And then, of course, all the boulders that we saw in Tonga, according to one tradition, these are boulders that Maui threw at a gigantic chicken. There was a gigantic moa in one tradition, and maybe we can talk a little bit about. Maybe there might be some conflation in the way that people have been talking about this. And then, there was one of the tradition is that there was a gigantic moa or chicken in Ewa that flew from Ewa to Tonga, to Tongatapu, and the two Maui Atalanga and Maui Kiskisi were, heralding these boulders at them, and they ended up in Haberuriku. Now, to me, these are all heriaki. So that probably is a reference to a earthquake, a major earthquake, which generated enough energy to create a tsunami or Beaupula in Tonga. I like Beaupula because it's talking about the high energy wave, this red wave. And these red wave Beaupula brought the boulders up to Tonga. Uh, some of our modern scientists have verified these boulders as been brought from the ocean to the inland through the process of the Beaupula. And one of the Beaupula, especially the gigantic boulder that we find in Kala'au, is most likely from what scientists refer to as a mega tsunami, or Beaupula Toho, as I translate it into Tonga. Maybe there's another better translation for this, which brought this sizable volcanic rocks into Tonga. So for me, there must be something about the chicken. Maybe Professor Lafitani, we can try to understand what the metaphoric meaning of the chicken is, that is associated with throwing the boulders at the chicken, and then it ended up in these places in Tonga. But these are all evidence of major natural phenomena that happened in the past in Tonga. We have the empirical evidence to see these boulders um, distributed in all places in Tonga, and what we know is that if it happened in the past, it's most likely going to happen in the present and will happen in the
The
future.
future, yeah.
This is as far as the volcanic eruption, but also uh, Beaupula and the bringing of boulders from the ocean into inland. We saw this in the last Beaupula that happened in Tonga in January. It brought
Yes.
so many boulders from the ocean up to Tonga, smaller sized boulders,
Yeah.
because this tsunami or this Beaupula was smaller. But you can also see that a larger Beaupula can definitely bring some of these boulders from the ocean up to the land. So that's where I see also the Maui clan as another group of indigenous scientists, very prominent, who study this area, these areas, especially the area of earthquake and Beaupula. So they're very much involved in geology, so geomythology or geological
Geomythology.
mythology, and of course they are wrapped up in very beautiful heriaki, especially the story of the Maui bringing fire from underworld, or the Mufuike or earthquake, and also the throwing the boulders at the gigantic moa or chicken. Um, all of these are all wrapped up heriaki of very beautiful story of natural phenomena in Tonga. So I'll share that for now, and maybe Professor Laftani, you can add a few things to what I just shared, or some question, and then I'll continue.
Yeah. When you talk about the the roles or the specific functions of the Maui and the Tangaloa, with this Beaukura and this Maungafi, the volcanic eruption in Tonga, and what we have been discussing, in the past weeks, and also on our pages, with some of the posts that it appears now that those who used to hold power, political or religious power, and in the past, like the Maui and the Tangaloa, it seems that they were also holders of other specific functions or expertise in society, maybe because of their courtly and their political power, but also maybe because they were the wise elders of society or the wise Ha'a lineage. And it's because I've been working, and also you as well and the others, on the Lo'au as the intellectual with the talk that the Lo'au were the intellectual Ha'a, you know. But with and then we were talking like Mahina and Professor Helu and others. They were talking of the Tangaloa and the Maui as the gods, and also they were the leaders, political leaders at the time. Mahina continued on, and you as well, talking about the artistic productions of the Maui and the Tangaloa, you know. But now, with this Paukula and this Mofuike and also the Mongaafi, it appears that there were more than just artists and political leaders, which might be the basic reasons for referring to them as gods at the time, because of all these collective powers. But it seems they were real scientists. They were ethnoscience or geomythologists for that matter, and it interests me, you know, a lot from what we have been trying to dwell into the past, to the indigenous knowledge, and slowly, gradually things appear. And it's amazing for me. It's phenomenal what these people were doing. Now we have started to agree that they were more. They did more than were just artists or political leaders. And with the fire, I think we need someone to. I mean, we are doing it ourselves, you and I, but maybe we need a student to do a PhD thesis on this topic, or write a book or somehow, because we have to do something. I mean, we already have started talking and trying to analyze and delve into some of these issues, but with the fire and all those stories about the fire, the controlling and the sun, and also the connection to the Mofuike, as the earthwork, about the Maui and also Maui Motua. It seems that he was Maui Motua and Tangaloa Lani or Eiki, they were seen to be the, I mean, we have mentioned that they were the Ulumotua of these two lines.
Yeah.
But I think with what we have been discussed and what you have explained, it's very encouraging, and it makes me to do more work and to dwell more, because it seems there are still unknown things there that we haven't explored or executed, but I think with this work and our program and more works, and I'm looking forward for a student to do a master or PhD research, particularly on this issue, because it seems what we have been discussed, Okusi, Fuka, and all the others, there are still more for us to explore. Eh? I'll pass on Kaili. We have 15 minutes to go. Still plenty of time, but I'll give it back to you. Thank you. The echo now it seems much better now. No repetition. We let all the way. Okay, thank you.
Yes, awesome. Yeah, I agree with you that this is the area that we need more research. We've started the initial phase of this research. You know, we know that there needs to be more research, especially in our area of geology or geography. You know, there are if we can find a student who would like to do research in these areas, but look at some of the stories of our forefathers and foremothers who were knowledgeable in this particular area. I think that would be a wonderful contribution to society as a
Yeah.
whole, and especially for us in Lo'au. But it's Tahelu began to sort of understand that these ancestors or deified ancestors had an important function, and we see that they are not only they were artists, they were political leaders, but now we see them as scientists, and I'm sure we can go into details into their scientific knowledge that they
Yeah.
have created. The other thing is that we in our Tongan discussion we talked about the need for our government in Tonga to heed the indigenous knowledge that
Yeah.
are encoded in our tala, right?
Yeah.
In our traditional narratives, because that would help them prepare for the next natural disaster,
Certainly.
especially in the area of volcanic eruption and also in the Beaupula area,
Yeah.
where they can see what our ancestors knew, how they responded to it. Did they move inland? Did they move to certain places in Tonga? Those are lessons that we know from our history that our ancestors knew and they pass on that information. If we neglect that traditional narratives, those tala, it is at our peril. We are going to suffer as a people if we don't take heed to look into some of these areas.
That's right.
And I think part of the problem is when the Christian missionaries came and they saw these stories as paganistic or heathen, and so some didn't really care about it. We had others who recorded, but there were others, and so these stories were relegated to the margin and were seen as just stories that were not true. And I think as a nation, as a people, we need to bring them back to their rightful place in our history and our tradition.
That's right.
I'm not advocating that we give up our belief in our religious belief, whether it's Christianity or others. I think they need to go together. In Tava, we call this as Hoa. They must go as a Hoa equally to be able to see both the story, whether scientific stories coming from the West, but also our own indigenous science. Both must go hand in hand, right? These are the hulls of our double hull canoe. This is our karia that
Yeah.
will help us as we voyage to the future. And I think for a long time we've been going with only one hull, with a single hull. And in order for us to move faster and progress, we need to bring this so that we can bring both knowledge together. And this is the part that I really admire about Atenisi, and I see that also with Lo'au University, that we embrace all the knowledge, whether they're
It's
coming
right.
from Western science and also indigenous science. We embrace them, and we use both knowledge system to critique and challenge each other to see where we can improve.
It's right.
But we cannot just go with one and leave the other. Both must be equally valued.
Yeah.
And I'd like to challenge our present educational system in Tonga, that they bring these knowledge and make it part of their school. Elementary school should be learning some of our tala to help them not only prepare them but to learn about the scientific knowledge and the art and everything that comes with it. And this holistic approach to education, this looking at education as a totality, not partiality but totality,
Yes.
where you bring both knowledge system in the way that we think about it. And I'm not saying we should not critique our tala. I think it's fair game for us as academics, and especially in Loau, to still be critical of some of this knowledge, and think about the way that we can improve it. Uh, I'm not trying to romanticize our tala and say everything is true, but I think it's through the process of the dialogue and critiquing and critical thinking and analyzing, using our training as the intellectual lineage of Tonga, especially the Lo'au and others who want to participate. That these are ways that we can move forward in these areas, and not just neglect them and not care about these areas. And so that's the challenge that I have, and I hope that people in Tonga and other Tongans, I think for us in the diaspora, we have come to see the importance of this knowledge and its significance. I'm not sure that our Tongans in the homeland see it that way. I think some do, but I think others are probably more interested in Western knowledge, which is fine. I'm just advocating for balance, for potu potu tatau, in the way that we do this. That's my what I want to share. Professor Lafitani, do you have any other comments or addition to this area?
Yeah, I think we have to somehow put more pressure on those ideas of the government and, and people in Tonga. I still remember when we